Sergeant Emily Carter wasn't supposed to be anywhere special that afternoon. The armory was quiet, its long rows of weapon racks standing in silence like sentinels. The air carried that familiar blend of gun oil, dust, and faint metal tang comforting. To some, suffocating to others. For Emily, it was background noise, the smell of routine. Her assignment for the day was simple: inspect and clean a batch of weapons that had just arrived from storage. Most were standard rifles, easy enough to strip, wipe, and reassemble. She didn't expect anything unusual. Routine work, she thought. The kind of mindless task that let the hours slip by unnoticed. But then her hands closed around something different. It was an M40 sniper rifle, heavier than the others, resting inside a foam-lined case. Unlike the standard rifles, this one carried a presence. The stock was scuffed, the scope well-worn, the barrel darkened from repeated use. She lifted it carefully onto the bench, running her fingers across its surface. Whoever had carried this weapon before had relied on it often. That much was obvious. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, settling into her rhythm. She worked with practiced efficiency, bolt out, barrel swabbed, action cleaned. The clicks and clacks of disassembly filled the stillness, a kind of mechanical music she knew by heart. Her movements were precise, almost graceful, learned from years of repetition. She hummed softly to herself, a tune she didn't quite recognize. Cleaning rifles wasn't glamorous, but she respected the discipline behind it. A soldier's weapon was an extension of themselves, and maintaining it was as important as maintaining the body. Halfway through wiping down the barrel, her cloth snagged. She frowned, pulling it back. At first, she thought it was buildup, maybe a bit of grime that resisted the oil. She held the barrel closer to the light, rotating it. That's when she saw them, not scratches, not damage, lines, thin, sharp, deliberate marks etched into the steel, running parallel in careful rows. Her brow furrowed. She leaned closer, brushing her thumb across them. They weren't accidental. They had been carved there with purpose, each line precise and deep enough to endure years of wear. She started counting. 1, 2, 3. The numbers grew as her heart picked up speed. She reached 20, then 30. Her chest tightened. By 40, her breath came shallow, each number settling heavier in her stomach. 47. She stopped, her mouth dry. 47 lines. The realization sank in like a stone thrown into still water. These weren't random etchings. These were tallies. A record. A kill count. Emily swallowed hard, her pulse loud in her ears. Soldiers told stories, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes bravado. But carving kills into your weapon wasn't regulation. It wasn't even spoken about in good company. It was the kind of thing that lived in whispered rumors, in the shadows between duty and obsession. She set the barrel down, staring at it, as though it might explain itself. Her mind raced with questions. Who had carried this rifle? Why had they carved those marks? What did it mean to them? Pride? Guilt? Ritual? The silence of the armory pressed in tighter, suffocating. She felt suddenly small, holding a piece of steel that carried the weight of 47 lives. Emily shook her head, trying to clear the unease. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe some soldier, bored on deployment, had carved them for effect. Maybe it didn't mean what it looked like. But the precision of the marks told her otherwise. Each line had been etched with care, almost reverence. Whoever had done it hadn't been fooling around. She tried to refocus on her work, but her hands trembled. The rifle wasn't just a tool, it was a story, one she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. For a moment, she considered putting it back in its case, locking it away, and forgetting she had seen anything. Pretend it was just another rifle, nothing more. That would be the safe choice. But her eyes kept drifting back to the marks. 47. The number pulsed in her mind, a drumbeat she couldn't silence. She rubbed her palms against her fatigues, suddenly aware of the sweat beating at her temples. It wasn't hot in the armory, but her skin prickled as though she'd stepped into the desert sun. Emily had been in the army long enough to know that certain things carried weight beyond their appearance. A folded flag, a faded photograph tucked into a helmet, a name etched onto a memorial wall. This rifle, with its carved tally, belonged to that realm. She wasn't supposed to know, and yet here it was, in her hands. Her thoughts spun. Should she tell someone? Report it? Or keep it to herself? She didn't want to invite trouble, but trouble seemed to have already found her. The sound of footsteps echoed suddenly down the corridor, breaking the stillness. Heavy, deliberate, authoritative. Colonel Harris. Emily stiffened instinctively, snapping to attention. The colonel's presence was impossible to ignore. Commanding. Sharp, the kind of man who carried discipline in every stride. His boots struck the concrete floor with practiced weight as he entered the armory. His eyes, always scanning, landed immediately on the rifle in her hands, and then on the barrel. Emily froze, the weapon suddenly feeling like contraband. Harris's gaze sharpened, narrowing with recognition. He walked closer, slow but steady, until he stood directly before her. Without a word, he extended his hand. She hesitated only a second before surrendering the rifle. Her stomach nodded. The colonel lifted it, as though reacquainting himself with an old adversary. His thumb traced the etchings, one by one, lingering as though each tally told him something. She couldn't hear. His jaw tightened. His expression darkened into something she had never seen on his face before. Not anger, but gravity. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost reluctant. "This rifle," he said, "wasn't supposed to be here." Emily opened her mouth, but no words came. Harris looked at her, his eyes hard. "Sergeant, what you've just uncovered, it's not for you to carry." He set the rifle down gently, almost reverently, on the bench. His hand lingered on the barrel before pulling away, as though letting go of something dangerous. Emily's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She wanted to ask what he meant, who the rifle belonged to, why those marks were there. But the weight in his voice told her the answers weren't simple, and maybe weren't safe. The colonel straightened, his shoulders squaring. "Leave this to me, Carter, and forget what you saw." But she knew, even in that moment, that forgetting would be impossible. Because the rifle wasn't just steel and wood anymore. It was a ghost. And ghosts, once seen, don't disappear. The silence in the armory was broken only by the faint ticking of the wall clock. Sergeant Emily Carter stood rigidly at attention as Colonel Harris's eyes lingered on the sniper rifle, his thumb pressed firmly against the barrel where the marks were carved. He didn't speak immediately, and the weight of his silence made the room feel smaller. Emily's throat was dry. She wanted to say something, anything, to fill the heavy air, but words refused to form. Her training told her to remain silent until addressed. Her instincts screamed at her to explain that she hadn't meant to pry, that she was only following routine cleaning orders. The colonel finally exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled breath. "Carter," he said, his voice low but steady. "Where did you find this?" Emily swallowed. "In the shipment from storage, sir. It was assigned to me for cleaning." Harris's gaze flicked to her, sharp and calculating. He studied her face, as though measuring her sincerity. "And what exactly did you notice?" The question carried a dangerous weight. She hesitated, caught between honesty and caution. If she admitted she had counted the marks, what would that mean? Would she be accused of curiosity, of stepping into something beyond her rank? "Just where on the barrel, sir?" she said carefully, keeping her tone neutral. The colonel's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't call her out. Instead, he lifted the rifle again, angling it toward the light. The etchings glistened faintly, unmistakable. Harris's jaw tightened, and for a fleeting moment, something flickered in his expression, something Emily had never seen in a commanding officer. Not anger, not disappointment, fear. He set the rifle down gently on the bench, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. This weapon, he said, more to himself than to her, should have been destroyed. Emily's heart thudded in her chest. Destroyed? Weapons were retired, refurbished, sometimes archived, but rarely destroyed. Only those tied to something dangerous. Sir, she began cautiously. May I ask? Harris cut her off with a sharp glance. No, you may not. The rebuke stung, but more than that, it deepened her unease. She clenched her fists at her sides, fighting the urge to push further. Yet curiosity gnawed at her, stronger than fear. With deliberate slowness, Harris leaned against the bench, his hands braced on either side of the rifle. His gaze seemed far away now, focused not on Emily, but on memories only he could see. This belonged to a man you're better off never knowing, he said softly. Emily's mind spun. A man, a sniper, the owner of those 47 etched lines. She thought of the whispers she had overheard in the barracks over the years, stories traded like contraband between soldiers. A name had always surfaced in those whispers, spoken with both awe and unease. Kane. Before she could stop herself, the name slipped out. Staff Sergeant Kane? The colonel's eyes snapped to hers, sharp and cold. Emily's breath caught. She had stepped onto dangerous ground, and she knew it. Harris studied her, his expression unreadable. At last he nodded once, curtly. You've heard the name. Emily shifted uneasily. Rumors, sir. Just stories. Stories, Harris repeated, his tone heavy. He let the word hang in the air. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, Kane was real. And those marks you saw, they're not rumors, they're records. Her stomach twisted. 47, she whispered before she could stop herself. Harris's face darkened. He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a near growl. You counted. Emily stiffened. Yes, sir. The colonel's eyes bore into hers, not with anger, but with something colder warning. Do yourself a favor, Sergeant. Forget the number. Forget the marks. Forget this rifle exists. But Emily couldn't. The image was seared into her mind, as clear as the scars carved into the steel. 47 lives, etched by hand, impossible to erase. Harris seemed to sense her struggle. He straightened, clasping his hands behind his back, his command presence returning. Carter, there are truths in this world that don't serve you to know. You've brushed against one. Step back before it consumes you. Emily nodded automatically. Yes, sir. But her mind rebelled. Against obedience. Soldiers were trained to follow orders, but they were also trained to seek truth, to understand the battles they fought. What was the point of discipline if it demanded blindness? The colonel picked up the rifle again, holding it as though it carried both weight and memory. You're dismissed, Sergeant, he said, his tone final. Emily hesitated. Sir, permission. To ask one thing? His brow furrowed. One. Why wasn't the rifle destroyed, if it was supposed to be? For the first time, Harris faltered. His gaze dropped to the barrel, his fingers brushing the tallies as though tracing ghosts. Because some things refuse to stay buried, he said quietly. The word sent a chill down Emily's spine. She saluted, turned sharply, and left the armory. But as she stepped into the hallway, the weight of the colonel's words and the rifle's marks followed her. The barracks buzzed with subdued chatter that evening, the way it always did when soldiers returned from drills and routines. Emily sat on her bunk, staring at her boots, the echoes of the day replaying in her mind. She had expected monotony. Instead, she had stumbled onto a ghost story come to life. Her bunkmate, Specialist Rivera, glanced at her curiously. "You look like you saw a ghost." Emily forced a weak smile. "Just tired," Rivera smirked. "We're all tired." She flopped onto her bunk, pulling a magazine from under her pillow. "Heard a rumor, though. Something about you cleaning a sniper rifle today?" Emily's pulse spiked. "What kind of rumor?" Rivera shrugged. "That it wasn't just any rifle. That it was Kane's." Emily stiffened, but forced her face to stay neutral. "People talk too much," Rivera chuckled. "Yeah, maybe. Still, if it was his, damn, that guy was a legend." She lowered her voice. "They say he never missed. Ever." Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to dismiss it as barracks gossip, but after what she had seen, she couldn't. Rivera leaned closer, her tone conspiratorial. "You know why he disappeared, right?" Emily shook her head slowly. "They say he went crazy. 47 confirmed kills, maybe more. Started carving them into his rifle, like trophies. Command couldn't handle it, so they cut him loose." Rivera's eyes glimmered with the thrill of the story. Emily's blood ran cold. The rumor wasn't entirely wrong. She turned away, lying back on her bunk. "Don't believe everything you hear," she muttered. But even as she said it, the tallies burned in her memory. That night, Emily lay awake long after the barracks had gone quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was steady, but her mind wasn't. She saw the rifle each time she closed. Her eyes, the marks etched like scars into her thoughts. 47. Who had those lives belonged to? Were they enemies on the battlefield? Innocents caught in the crossfire? Or worse, targets chosen for reasons outside the rules of engagement? The colonel's warning echoed in her ears. Forget it, but how could she? Emily rolled onto her side, clutching her pillow as though it might anchor her. She had spent her career believing in structure, in rules, in the chain of command. But now she felt as though she had stumbled onto a crack in the foundation, a hidden truth no one dared admit. And it terrified her. The next day, she returned to duty, trying to bury her thoughts beneath routine. But everywhere she looked, she saw echoes of the rifle. Soldiers cleaning their weapons, laughing over cards, joking about drills. It all felt lighter than it should, as if everyone else could afford ignorance, while she carried a secret. In the mess hall, whispers followed her. She caught fragments. Kane's rifle. Carter saw it. 47. The numbers spread like wildfire, twisting through rumor and exaggeration. Emily clenched her jaw, keeping her head down, but she could feel the weight of every glance. She hated it. She hadn't asked to be part of Kane's story. She hadn't asked to carry the burden of those etched lines. And yet the rifle had chosen her. That evening, she was summoned again to Colonel Harris's office. The blinds were drawn, the lights dim, the rifle resting on his desk. When she entered, Harris didn't look up immediately. He was staring at the weapon, his fingers drumming lightly on the wood beside it. "Sit," he ordered. Emily obeyed, her pulse quickening. Harris leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "Carter, I told you to forget this, but you haven't." She opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. "You're not good at hiding things. That's not always a flaw, but here, it could get you killed." Her chest tightened. "Sir, I don't understand." "You don't need to," Harris interrupted. His voice was harder now, edged with steel. Kane was used by people who operate in shadows. Those 47 marks? They're not just numbers. They're assignments sanctioned, erased, forgotten by everyone except the man who pulled the bow. Trigger. Emily felt her stomach twist. Then why let him carve them? Harris's eyes darkened. Because sometimes the only way a soldier stays sane is by remembering. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Harris leaned back, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Do yourself a favor, Carter. Don't dig deeper. Some truths will bury you before you ever uncover them. Emily sat frozen, torn between fear and defiance. But one thought echoed in her mind, louder than his warning. She couldn't forget. Not now. Not ever. Asterisk, the armory's fluorescent lights hummed faintly, but Emily Carter barely noticed. She sat stiffly on the wooden chair opposite Colonel Harris's desk, the sniper rifle lying between them like a sleeping beast. Its barrel gleamed under the lamp. Every mark a shadow burned into her mind. Harris hadn't spoken in nearly a full minute. He simply stared at the weapon, his thumb running absently along the stock as if reacquainting himself with an old, bitter memory. Emily shifted uneasily, but she didn't dare break the silence. Finally, Harris spoke, his voice low, measured. This belonged to Staff Sergeant Kane. Emily's pulse skipped. The name wasn't unfamiliar. She'd heard it whispered across barracks like a ghost story. Kane, the sniper who never missed, the soldier who disappeared without a trace. His name carried both reverence and dread, though no one could ever confirm the truth. She kept her voice steady. Sir, I've heard rumors. Rumors, Harris echoed, almost bitterly. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. Do you know what rumors are, Sergeant? They're shadows of the truth. Distorted shapes of something real. Kane's story is one of those shadows. Emily hesitated. What's the truth? Sir? The colonel looked at her for a long moment, and down at the rifle again. His fingers traced one of the carved lines. The truth is, Kane was a soldier unlike any I've ever known. Brilliant, disciplined, lethal. He could steady his hand under pressure that would break most men. He was effective. Emily swallowed. Effective enough to carve 47 marks into his weapon? The colonel's eyes darkened. He nodded slowly. 47 that we know of. Maybe more. Each mark carved after a mission. Each life remembered. Emily frowned. Remembered? Most snipers don't keep count. They don't, Harris agreed. At least, not like this. But Kane was different. He didn't carve those lines for glory, Carter. He did it because he was told to. The words hit her like a slap. Told to? By who? Harris didn't answer immediately. He stood, walked to the blinds, and adjusted them, peering out into the dim evening light. His shoulders were rigid, his posture heavy with unspoken weight. By men above my pay grade. Men you'll never meet, but whose fingerprints are all over the dirtiest parts of war. Emily felt her stomach knot. She had expected personal obsession, maybe some twisted ritual. But orders? That suggested something far darker. Sir, what kind of missions? Stop. Harris's tone cracked like a whip. He turned sharply, his eyes blazing. You're reaching where you shouldn't. Kane carried out assignments that were never supposed to exist. And when a soldier becomes too valuable, too dangerous, or too unstable, command has ways of removing them. Emily fell silent, her pulse hammering. Harris's gaze softened slightly, though his voice stayed firm. I shouldn't have said this much, but you need to understand what you found is not a story to tell, not a curiosity to chase. It's a weight, and it will crush you if you carry it. Emily stared at the rifle, the 47 lines etched in steel. Kane's ghost seemed to stare back at her. That night, the barracks buzzed with restless energy. Word of Kane's rifle had spread like wildfire, despite her silence. Soldiers whispered in corners, their voices thick with a mix of fascination and fear. Emily caught fragments as she passed through the hallways. Carter saw it, they say. Kane's tally. 47 confirmed. disappeared because he lost it. No, because command erased him. Every version was different, exaggerated, and wrong. But all of them shared one truth. Kane's legend was alive again, and Emily had been the spark. Specialist Rivera cornered her after chow, eyes wide with curiosity. "Come on, Carter, you gotta tell me. Was it really his rifle? Did you see the marks?" Emily forced a flat tone. "I don't know what you're talking about," Rivera smirked. "Don't play dumb. Half the base is talking about it." She lowered her voice. "They say Kane carved each mark right after a kill. Some say he even whispered their names while he did it." Emily's chest tightened. She hated the thrill in Rivera's tone, as if this were some campfire tale. "Rumors," she muttered, rushing past. But the whispers clung to her like smoke. Sleep eluded her. In the darkness of the barracks, Emily stared at the ceiling. The faint snores of soldiers around her failing to drown out her thoughts. She imagined Kane sitting alone after each mission, rifle across his lap, blade in hand, carving steel with slow precision. What had he been thinking? Was it ritual, like a tally on a chalkboard? A penance? A reminder of the cost? The colonel's words returned to her. He was told to remember. By who? And why? Emily turned onto her side, restless. She had joined the army for service, for honor, for the belief that she was part of something larger than herself. But Kane's story whispered of a darker truth, that soldiers were pawns in games they never fully saw. 2 days later, Harris called her back into his office. The rifle was gone from his desk. He sat rigidly behind the wood, hands folded, eyes tired. "Carter, I want this clear. What you saw ends here. You don't mention it again. Not to your peers, not to your superiors, not to anyone. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Emily replied. Automatically, but Harris's gaze lingered, piercing. "Do you mean that?" Emily hesitated. The safe answer was yes, but her silence betrayed her. The colonel sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're not built to ignore the truth. I see that now. Kane wasn't either. That's why he broke." Her breath caught. "Broke how?" Harris's eyes lifted, hollow. "When a man carries ghosts long enough, he either becomes one, or loses himself trying to outrun them." Emily sat frozen, her mind reeling. The colonel leaned forward, his tone suddenly sharp again. "Remember this, Carter. Kane's story isn't about legend. It's about consequence. If you chase his ghost, it will consume you." She nodded, but deep down, she knew she couldn't let go. Later that evening, as the base settled into quiet, Emily walked past the armory. The doors were locked, lights dimmed, but she felt the rifle's presence still inside. Even without seeing it, she knew it was there like a weight pressing against the walls. She paused, staring at the steel doors, her hand brushing against the cool handle. For a fleeting moment, she considered finding the key, sneaking inside, and holding the weapon again. Maybe then she'd understand Kane. Maybe then she'd silence the knowing questions. But she turned away, forcing herself back to the barracks. That night, she dreamed of Kane. Not his face, she had never seen it, but of a silhouette, crouched behind a scope, the crack of a rifle, echoing across desert wind. After each shot, the figure lowered the weapon, pulled a blade from his vest, and carved a line into the steel. The sound of metal scraping filled her ears, relentless, until she jolted awake, heart pounding. The whispers of the barracks were one thing, but the whispers in her dreams were far worse. Kane was no longer just a rumor. He was haunting her. The next morning, Emily found a folded slip of paper under her bunk mattress. No name, no signature. Just 4 words, written in sharp block letters. "Stop asking about Kane." Her stomach dropped. She looked around the barracks, but no one seemed to notice her unease. Soldiers were lacing boots, drinking coffee, laughing at inside jokes. Normal life. But somewhere among them, someone knew she hadn't let go, and someone didn't want her to dig deeper. Emily crumpled the note in her fist, her jaw tightening. Kane's ghost wasn't just haunting her anymore. It was warning her. The paper note burned in Emily's pocket all morning, its words repeating in her mind like a drumbeat. Stop asking about Kane. She hadn't asked anyone, at least, not directly. But somehow, someone had noticed her questions, her hesitation with Harris, even the way her eyes lingered on the armory. And that meant someone was watching her. At breakfast in the mess hall, she forced herself to appear calm. Soldiers crowded. The long tables, joking over powdered eggs and lukewarm coffee. But every laugh, every glance felt like it carried an edge. She sat across from Rivera, who leaned forward eagerly. You look like you saw a ghost, Rivera teased, eyes glinting. Or maybe you're dreaming about one. Emily's grip on her fork tightened. Not funny, Rivera shrugged. Come on, Carter. You can't expect people to stop talking about it. Kane's legend is like a campfire. Everyone wants to sit around and feel the heat. Emily kept her voice flat. Legends aren't real. Neither is luck, but some people swear by it, Rivera shot back, grinning. Then she lowered her tone. Tell me something. Did Colonel Harris really confirm it was Kane's rifle? Emily looked up sharply. Rivera's smirk faltered under her glare. I said it's just a rumor. But Rivera's reaction told Emily something crucial. The Colonel's private admission had leaked. Somehow, words spoken behind closed doors had seeped into the open. Either Harris had slipped, or someone else had been listening. That evening, the whispers grew louder. As Emily passed the common room, she caught fragments of hushed conversation. Kane never missed. His kill count unreal. Carter saw the rifle herself. They say she's digging for more. She paused. Outside the doorway, her chest tightening. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. The tone had shifted accusatory, wary. Inside, Corporal Mason's voice rose. You really trust her? A sergeant who's suddenly obsessed with some ghost story? That's how people get themselves and others burned. A few soldiers muttered in agreement. Emily clenched her jaw and walked away before they noticed her. She'd been in the army long enough to know how fast suspicion could isolate a soldier. Once trust cracked, it spread like a fissure through stone. And Kane's ghost was driving that crack straight toward her. 2 days later, she was summoned to Harris's office again. The colonel didn't look up as she entered. He was shuffling papers, his jaw tight, a muscle ticking in his temple. The rifle wasn't on the desk this time, just a thick folder. Its cover stamped classified. Sit, he ordered. Emily obeyed, her pulse racing. Harris finally looked at her, eyes sharp. Do you know what the problem with legends is, Carter? She shook her head cautiously. They spread faster than the truth, and they last longer than facts. He tapped the folder with one finger. This is Kane's official record. What? Little of it I'm even allowed to see. And it doesn't matter what it says, because soldiers out there have already decided who Kane was. They've decided what his rifle means. And they've decided you're connected to it. Emily swallowed hard. I never asked for that. Doesn't matter. Harris's tone cut through the air. You're in the middle of it now. Rumors make enemies, and enemies get soldiers killed. Her stomach turned. Sir, what do? You want me to do? Keep your head down. Do your job. And for God's sake, stop feeding the fire. Emily hesitated. Sir? What if the fire is already burning without me? Harris stared at her a long moment, then closed the folder with a snap. Then you make damn sure you don't get burned. That night, Emily went for a run along the perimeter road, trying to clear her head. The desert air was sharp, dry, filled with the scent of dust and fuel. Stars glittered overhead, indifferent to the chaos below. But she couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Her boots crunched against gravel, her breath steady, but every so often, she caught the faint echo of another step out of rhythm, too close. She glanced back. The road stretched empty behind her. Still, the unease grew. By the time she returned to the barracks, sweat chilled on her skin. She was certain of one thing. The note hadn't been a bluff. Someone really was watching. Days blurred into restless routine. Training, drills, patrols. Emily threw herself into the motions, hoping the rhythm would drown the whispers. But tension gnawed at her unit. Jokes carried a sharper edge. Conversations quieted when she entered a room. One afternoon, during target practice, she felt it most. Soldiers lined up on the range, rifles cracking in sequence. Emily adjusted her scope, steadying her breath, finger poised on the trigger. Then came the comment, loud enough for all to hear. "Careful, Carter. Don't go carving that one into your rifle." Laughter rippled through the line. Emily froze, her finger tightening involuntarily. The target blurred for a heartbeat before. She forced herself to breathe, reset, and fire. The shot hit dead center, but the laughter stung more than a miss ever could. That evening, Rivera approached her again, quieter this time. "Listen," Rivera murmured, glancing around to make sure no one else was near. "People are saying you're cursed. That Kane's ghost is sticking to you. I don't believe in that crap, but you should know what they're saying." Emily's voice was tight. "Cursed? That's ridiculous." "Yeah, maybe, but superstition spreads faster than orders." Rivera hesitated. "If I were you, I'd be careful. Not just about Kane, about who's paying attention." Emily studied her. Rivera wasn't mocking now. She looked genuinely worried. "Do you know something I don't?" Emily asked. Rivera shook her head quickly. "No, but I know enough to keep my mouth shut. You should too." She walked away before Emily could press further. Sleep became a stranger. When she did drift off, dreams twisted into nightmares. She saw Kane again, faceless, carving steel as whispers echoed around him. But this time, when he turned, the face staring back wasn't his. It was hers. She woke drenched in sweat, heart hammering, the sound of scraping metal lingering in her ears. The next morning, she found another note. This one wasn't under her mattress, but slipped into her boot. 4 new words, scrawled in the same sharp hand. "You're next to break." Her hands trembled as she held the slip. She crumpled it into her fist, but the words branded themselves into her mind. Next to break. By the end of the week, Harris called her in again. The colonel's office felt heavier than before. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his voice low and gravelly. "Carter," he said, "do you believe in ghosts?" The question caught her off guard. "No, sir." "Good." He leaned forward. "Because Kane isn't a ghost. He's a cautionary tale. And if you don't let him go, you'll end up just like him, buried under rumors and shadows until no one remembers who you really were." Emily's jaw tightened. "Sir, with respect, if Kane wasn't a ghost, then where is he?" Harris stared at her, unblinking. Then he whispered, "That's the question that got him erased." Emily's blood ran cold. That night, as she lay in her bunk, the whispers of the barracks seeped through the walls. Soldiers spoke of Kane with reverence and fear, his name weaving through the air like smoke. And beneath it all, Emily felt the crushing weight of inevitability. The ghost she hadn't believed in was no longer just a story. It was circling her, drawing closer with every rumor, every note, every stolen glance. Emily knew one thing with chilling certainty. If she didn't find the truth about Kane soon, the whispers would consume her too. Asterisk, the note in her boot wouldn't leave Emily's mind. You're next to break. The words clung to her thoughts, even as she moved through daily drills, briefings, and weapons checks. Every time she laced her boots, her hands shook. Every time she caught someone's stare, she wondered, was it you? Did you leave it? By now, it wasn't just curiosity about Kane. It was survival. If she didn't uncover the truth, she'd be destroyed by the shadows whispering his name. She needed answers. And answers lived where no one wanted her to look inside. The locked records. Late one night, she slipped into the administrative wing. The building was mostly dark, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. She moved quietly, boots muffled by the worn linoleum. Her target was a secure archive room she'd once been sent to while running paperwork. The door required clearance above her level, but she had a plan. In her cargo pocket was a borrowed ID card Rivera's. Rivera had left it on her bunk during a shower, and Emily had hesitated before pocketing it. Guilt weighed heavy, but desperation outweighed it. Rivera was a friend, maybe the only one. She had left. But Emily couldn't wait for permission that would never come. She swiped the card. The reader blinked red, then green. The door clicked. Inside, rows of filing cabinets stood like silent soldiers, their drawers stuffed with decades of secrets. A single desk lamp glowed at the far corner, casting a pool of light. Emily's heart pounded as she scanned labels, deployments, tier reports, special operations. Her fingers trembled when she reached the drawer marked personnel, restricted access. She pulled it open, and there he was. Staff Sergeant Michael Kane. The file was thinner than she expected. No thick stack of commendations, no detailed mission logs. Just a sparse record almost deliberately barren. She flipped through quickly. Basic training, marksman certification, promotion dates. But after 2012, the details blurred. Pages were redacted, black ink swallowing entire sections. His final listed mission was stamped with one word, classified. No death certificate, no honorable discharge, no court-martial, just silence. It was as if Kane had been swallowed whole, his life carved away like the steel marks on his rifle. She nearly jumped when the door handle rattled. Emily froze, clutching the file. The door opened slightly, then paused. A shadow moved across the crack. Her breath caught. If anyone found her here, it was over. The shadow lingered, then moved. On, the door shut again. Emily exhaled shakily and shoved the file back. But not before she slipped one page free, a heavily redacted mission summary. Its header reading, Operation Sable Dawn, Forward Base Ghazni, Afghanistan. Her hands shook as she tucked the page inside her jacket. She replaced everything exactly, as she'd found it, then slipped out. Back in her bunk, she unfolded the stolen page beneath the dim glow of her reading lamp. Most of the words were blacked out, but a few fragments survived. Sniper Overwatch. Classified target of interest. Casualties. Undisclosed. Extraction compromised. Survivor reports conflicting. At the bottom, a final note in smaller type. Further inquiries restricted under directive from Call Harris. Emily's stomach turned. Harris, the colonel who had warned her to stop digging. The same man who insisted Kane was a cautionary tale. It wasn't just legend. Harris was part of the lock on Kane's story. The next day, she cornered Rivera during maintenance duty. "You ever hear of Operation Sable Dawn?" Emily asked in a low voice. Rivera frowned. "Sable Dawn? No. Sounds like something they'd keep locked down tight." She studied Emily. "Why? Where'd you hear it?" Emily hesitated. She couldn't admit she'd broken into the archives. Just overheard it. Rivera's gaze sharpened. "You're playing with fire, Carter. People disappear for less." Emily forced a shrug. "Just curiosity." Rivera dropped her wrench and leaned closer. Curiosity didn't kill Kane, but it sure as hell erased him. Don't let it erase you too. The words echoed Harris's warning almost exactly. That night, Emily tried to sleep, but the redacted words danced behind her eyelids. Overwatch. Compromised. Conflicting. Images formed in her mind. Kane on a rooftop. Scope glinting. Dust storms rising. Radio static filling his ears. A mission gone wrong. Survivors whispering contradictions. And Harris, somewhere above it all, stamping black ink across Kane's existence. At 0300, she sat up abruptly. If Harris was the lock, she needed the key. Someone else had to have been there. She thought back. Her unit rotation had overlapped with others. Veterans always carried stories, tucked into corners of memory. Maybe one of them had seen Kane. She made a list in her notebook. Names, units, deployments. Then circled one Sergeant Miller, a grizzled veteran who spent most evenings smoking outside the motor pool. The next evening, she found Miller on his usual bench, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. "Miller," she said casually, leaning against the wall. "You ever hear of Sable Dawn?" His hand froze mid-lift. Ash dropped to the ground. "Where'd you hear that name?" he asked quietly. Emily shrugged. "Just floating around." Miller exhaled smoke, staring into the distance. That wasn't a mission. That was a graveyard. Emily's pulse quickened. "What happened?" He glanced at her, eyes hard. "Don't ask. You don't want the truth." "I do," she said firmly. Miller studied her for a long time, then ground out his cigarette. "All I'll say is this. Kane was there. And after that night, nobody wanted his name on paper anymore. Not the brass. Not the survivors. No one." Emily's throat tightened. "Why not?" Miller shook his head. "Because when a soldier sees too much, the army doesn't bury the body. It buries the story." The words hit her like a gut punch. Kane hadn't just vanished. He'd been buried under silence, on purpose. Back in her bunk, she pulled out the redacted page again. This time, Miller's words filled in the blanks between the black lines. Overwatch. Target. Conflicting reports. Buried. Kane hadn't broken. He'd seen something or done something that made him dangerous to remember. And now Emily was walking the same path. 2 nights later, another note appeared, slipped beneath her pillow. This one was longer. "Stop before you join him." Some stories don't want to be told. Emily's hands shook as she read it. Her first instinct was fear. But underneath, a spark of defiance flared. Someone wanted her silent. Someone thought they could scare her off. But fear had already consumed her for weeks. Now, she was angry. She folded the note carefully and slid it into her notebook, right next to the redacted page. If Kane's ghost had been carved into steel, she would carve his truth into memory. 2 days later, Emily caught Harris watching her during formation. His stare was sharp, probing, like he could read the stolen page in her pocket. She held his gaze, refusing to look away. If he was the law, she would find a way through. But as the ranks dispersed, Harris called out in his gravelly tone, "Carter, my office." Now, her chest tightened. This wasn't a summons, this was a test. The path Kane had walked was opening beneath her feet. And Emily knew the next step might decide whether she uncovered the truth or was buried beside it. Emily's boots clicked against the polished floor as she approached Colonel Harris's office. Each step tightened her chest. Soldiers passing in the corridor offered her brief nods, but none lingered. They knew better than to loiter outside the colonel's door. She paused before the brass nameplate, Colonel Thomas Harris, and swallowed. Her palms were damp. She forced herself to knock twice. "Enter," came the gravelly command. She pushed. The door opened. The colonel sat behind his wide desk, framed by shelves stacked with binders and commendations. His silver hair was cropped close, his expression unreadable. "Carter," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite, "sit." Emily obeyed, back stiff, trying not to betray the nerves pulsing in her throat. "You've been busy," Harris sighed, steepling his fingers. "I hear your performance on the range has improved. Word is you've been spending late nights around the admin wing, too. Care to explain?" Her pulse quickened. He knew. Or at least he suspected. "Just catching up on maintenance," she said carefully. "Trying to make myself useful." "Useful," he echoed, leaning back. "That's one word for it." His gaze sharpened. "Tell me, Carter, do you believe everything you read?" Emily froze. He was baiting her, testing how much she'd uncovered. "I believe what makes sense," she replied, keeping her voice steady. Harris smiled faintly, but it wasn't warm. "Good answer. But let me give you a piece of advice. The army runs on two things: order and silence. Order keeps men alive. Silence keeps the machine moving. When one soldier thinks they've uncovered a hidden truth, they usually find themselves crushed under both." Emily gripped her knees under the desk. "With respect, sir, some truths can't stay buried forever." His smile faded. The room seemed to grow colder. That's exactly what Kane thought. Her breath caught. He'd said the name. Out loud. Harris stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. Staff Sergeant Kane was one of the finest snipers this army produced. Calm, disciplined, lethal. But somewhere along the way, he lost perspective. He started asking questions. Questions above his pay grade. And questions like that. He turned, eyes locking on her. "Have consequences." Emily met his gaze. "What happened in Ghazni, sir?" "What was operation?" "Sable Dawn?" The colonel's jaw tightened. He returned to his desk and leaned in close, voice low. "That's not your concern. All you need to know is this. Kane died because he couldn't leave things alone. You're walking his trail, Carter. And if you don't stop, you'll share his fate." Her heart pounded, but she forced her voice steady. "If the truth killed him, maybe it deserves to be known." The colonel's hand slammed the desk, startling her. Papers rustled. "You think the truth is noble? The truth gets men killed. The truth undermines command. The truth is chaos. Do you want to be the one responsible for tearing this place apart?" Silence hung heavy. Emily's throat tightened, but she refused to break eye contact. Finally, Harris exhaled slowly, composure returning. "You're dismissed, Carter. Go back to your duties. And forget Kane. That's in order." She rose, saluted stiffly, and left the office. The hallway outside felt suffocating. Her legs carried her forward, but her mind reeled. Harris hadn't just confirmed Kane's story. He'd practically admitted burying it. But why? Emily made it back to her bunk, slamming the door shut behind her. She pulled the redacted page from her pocket, laying it on the desk. Harris's words echoed. Kane lost perspective. He asked questions. He couldn't leave things alone. She whispered into the silence. "What did you see, Kane?" The next days blurred. She threw herself into drills, into maintenance, into any task that kept her from dwelling too long. But the whispers grew. Soldiers glanced her way in mess. Hall lines. Conversations hushed when she walked into rooms. Rivera's eyes held worry whenever they met. One night, Rivera cornered her in the armory. "Emily, what did Harris say?" Emily shook her head. "He warned me. Told me Kane asked questions he shouldn't." Rivera sighed, rubbing her temples. "Then stop, please. This isn't a game. Harris has buried careers for less." Emily looked down at her hands, calloused and trembling. If he buried Kane's career, maybe his life, then he's already guilty of something worse. I can't just stop. Rivera's voice softened. Then at least be careful. Because if Harris is watching you, others are too. The warning proved true. That night, Emily woke to the faint sound of boots outside her door. She froze, listening as someone paused just beyond the threshold. A paper slid under the crack. When the footsteps faded, Emily retrieved it. This note was typed, neat and cold. We warned you. Stop digging, or you'll end up with him. Her skin crawled. Unlike the previous scrawled notes, this one was precise, deliberate like official correspondence. Emily burned it in her trash can, watching the words curl into ash. She couldn't stop. Not now. Not when the threat itself confirmed how deep the cover-up ran. The next step was riskier. If Harris controlled the records, she had to find someone beyond his reach. Someone who'd been there, boots on the ground, during sable dawn. She returned to Sergeant Miller. He stiffened when he saw her approach. I told you to let it go, he muttered. I can't, Emily said. They're threatening me now. If Kane saw something worth erasing, I need to know what it was. Please. Miller studied her with weary eyes. Finally, he sighed. You don't understand. We weren't supposed to be in Ghazni that night. Officially, it was an advisory mission. Unofficially, he trailed off. Unofficially what? Emily pressed. Miller's jaw worked. There was no target of interest. The brass sent us there for a deal. Locals, intel, maybe weapons. I never knew. But something went wrong. Shots fired. Civilians caught in the middle. Kane. He shook his head. Kane saw the aftermath. He tried to report it. Harris shut it down. Emily's chest tightened. Are you saying it was a cover-up? Civilian casualties? Miller's silence was answer enough. She whispered, That's why they erased him. Miller stood abruptly. I've said too much. Don't come to me again, Carter. This'll eat you alive. And with that, he walked away, leaving her trembling in the shadows. Back in her bunk, Emily stared at the rifle again, tracing the carved kill marks. She imagined Kane's hands etching each line, not just for confirmed targets, but for burdens. Carried. Maybe some of those marks weren't for enemies at all. Maybe they were for ghosts. Her notebook filled with frantic scribbles. Sable dawn, civilian casualties, Harris cover-up, Kane silenced. She stopped, pen hovering. A chilling thought crept in. If Kane was silenced for trying to tell the truth, why am I still alive? The answer came unbidden. Because they're watching me decide. Her every move, her hesitation, her determination, they were gauging whether she would break or persist. Emily set her jaw. Kane hadn't broken, and neither would she. Days later, during evening chow, Harris approached the table where Emily sat. The room quieted. He set a hand on her shoulder, grip firm, almost fatherly. Walk with me, he said. Emily obeyed, soldiers' eyes following them. They stepped outside into the cool night air. Harris lit a cigar, the glow illuminating his stern features. You remind me of Kane, he said after a long drag. Same fire, same defiance. He thought he could fight the system too. Emily swallowed. Maybe he wasn't wrong. Harris exhaled smoke, lips curling into something between amusement and pity. He was dead wrong. And if you don't wise up, Carter, you'll end up just as dead. Her breath hitched, but she forced a calm reply. If that's what it takes. Harris studied her, then shook his head. You really don't understand. This isn't about one soldier. This is about the machine, and the machine doesn't care who it grinds down. He flicked his cigar to the ground, crushing the ember. Beneath his boot. Last chance, Carter. Drop it. He walked away, leaving her trembling in the dark. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Harris's words reverberated, The machine doesn't care who it grinds down. But machines could break, and maybe Kane had found the crack. Emily turned toward her notebook, toward the ash of the burned note, toward the rifle gleaming faintly under the bunk light. She whispered into the silence, "I'm not stopping." For the first time since the whispers began, she felt less like a haunted soldier and more like a hunter. The colonel's shadow loomed large, but Emily had decided she would walk straight through it, no matter the cost. Emily had crossed the line. No more whispers. No more, "Maybe it's better to stop." She was deep in Kane's world now, and every corner of the base seemed to pulse with eyes. Every conversation, every glance, she interpreted as surveillance. Her first stop was the barracks library. Officially, it was for study, training manuals, and reference materials. But she had learned to skim mission logs, old deployment records, and any off-the-record annotations. She was looking for Sable Dawn, Operation Ghazni, and Kane's final assignments. Hours passed, and frustration mounted. Redacted pages, blank folders, and blacked-out logs. Everything was systematic. Kane had been scrubbed from the record, erased like a ghost, but that absence spoke volumes. It told her what Harris couldn't. Kane had uncovered something dangerous, something worth erasing. The next morning, Emily joined Rivera on routine vehicle maintenance. Rivera, sensing Emily's obsession, finally pressed. "Emily, you know this could ruin you, right?" Rivera said quietly. "If Harris catches wine that you're digging deeper, it's not just a warning. You could be out or worse." Emily wiped her hands on a rag, refusing to meet Rivera's eyes. "I don't care anymore. Someone tried to bury Kane. I need to know why." Rivera's shoulders sagged. "Then you're walking the same path. Be careful. Not everyone here wants the truth." Emily nodded, but inwardly, she knew she had no choice. Over the next few days, she followed threads former snipers, retired sergeants, old deployment logs. Each lead required delicate maneuvering. Some soldiers she approached were evasive, others hostile. One evening, she tracked a retired master sergeant to a small house off base. He greeted her warily. "You're chasing ghosts, kid," he said bluntly. "I'm not chasing ghosts. I need the truth about Kane," Emily replied firmly. The man's eyes darkened. "You don't understand. Kane didn't just disappear. He got in over his head. Saw something he shouldn't have. Command doesn't forgive that. They erase it. They erase him." Emily leaned in. "What did he see?" The sergeant exhaled slowly. "Weapons shipments, civilians caught in crossfire, operations that never made it into reports. Kane tried to document it. They stopped him, and when he started pushing, the army made sure he vanished from the books." Emily's jaw tightened. "Did he leave anything behind?" The sergeant shook his head. "Only whispers, only rumors. You'll find scraps, marks on his rifle. That's all anyone remembers." Back on base, Emily realized she needed something concrete, proof beyond whispers. Late that night, she returned to the restricted archives. Using the ID swipe she had borrowed before, she accessed the same drawer. Her hands shook as she sifted through files, scanning for anything unredacted. Finally, she found a small folder hidden behind others. Kane, operational debrief. Most of it was blacked out, but one document survived in part. Unplanned civilian casualties during extraction. Direct orders to suppress reports. Kane attempted unauthorized documentation. The implications were staggering. Kane hadn't failed his mission. He had defied orders to cover up innocent lives lost. That defiance had earned him a permanent erasure. Emily copied the document onto a flash drive, her fingers trembling. She had proof now. Real evidence. But danger followed. The next morning, Emily's bunk had been searched. Her notebook was gone. Her stolen flash drive missing. Panic surged. Whoever was watching her, maybe Harris himself, had moved. Rivera cornered her in the hall. "Emily, your stuff's gone. You've been followed." Emily's pulse raced. "Then they'll come after me next. They already threatened me." Rivera's voice was urgent. "You can't do this alone. Whoever erased Kane, they'll come for anyone who digs too deep. You have to be smart." Emily clenched her jaw. "I have to finish what Kane started. I can't let them bury it all." Rivera studied her, eyes filled with both fear and admiration. "Then you're walking into the fire. Just know, fire burns." Over the next days, Emily became a ghost herself. She avoided patrols, kept interactions brief, and trusted no one fully. Every glance in the mess hall felt like scrutiny. Every casual conversation sounded like a test. Then came betrayal. One night, she found the lights flickering in the barracks. A shadow moved along the corridor. She stepped closer, heart pounding. It was Rivera. "I had to," Rivera whispered, voice trembling. "They promised me protection if I told them everything you were doing." "I didn't want to." Emily's hands clenched. "You betrayed me?" Rivera shook her head. "I didn't have a choice. They're watching everyone. If I didn't, they'd come for me too." Emily swallowed hard. Betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Kane had faced the same, and now she understood the full weight of the machine Harris had described. She backed away, voice low. "I have to do this myself." With Rivera no longer an ally, Emily turned to her final option, the sniper community. Veterans, retired officers, anyone who had worked with Kane. She found a retired staff sergeant, Ellis, living quietly on the outskirts of town. He greeted her warily. "You're chasing a dead man," he said bluntly. "I know," Emily replied, "but I need to know why he vanished." Ellis studied her, then nodded. Kane's problem wasn't skill, it was conscience. During Sable Dawn, he saw things that contradicted every rule, every order. He reported them, and the brass buried it. They erased him because truth is inconvenient. You want to know the rest? Emily leaned forward. Every detail. Ellis hesitated, then whispered. He kept a tally on that rifle. Not for pride. For guilt. For every life taken that shouldn't have been. Every mark was a memory, a warning. And the higher-ups didn't like him reminding them what they'd done. Emily's eyes widened. So the rifle, the marks. They weren't just kills? No, Ellis said. They were sins. And Kane paid for remembering. Armed with this revelation, Emily felt both fear and purpose. She now understood. Kane's true legacy. The ghost wasn't just a legend. It was a ledger of conscience in a world that tried to erase morality. But she was closing in on danger. Harris had eyes everywhere. The notes, the missing flash drive, Rivera's betrayal, it all pointed to one truth. She was being watched, and time was running out. Emily spent hours planning her next move. She needed one final piece, verification of Sable Dawn civilian. Casualties. One report, one witness, one undeniable fact. If she could get that, Kane's story and the truth about the erasure would finally stand. But as she lay awake that night, staring at the dark ceiling, she knew one thing with certainty. Shadows were closing in, and her next step could either uncover the truth or destroy her entirely. Emily's palms were slick as she gripped the flash drive. It contained the final proof she needed, the partially redacted Sable Dawn operational report, Ellis's witness testimony, and the faint trace of Kane's original mission notes. Every word was a thread, capable of unraveling the carefully constructed silence surrounding Kane's disappearance. She had waited for the cover of night. Now the barracks were quiet. Even the hum of fluorescent lights seemed muted, leaving her alone with her thoughts, and the knowledge that every step she took could be watched. Her destination was Harris's office. Not to confront, not as an accused soldier, but to leave evidence where it could be seen, undeniable, and impossible to bury. The corridor stretched before her like a gauntlet. Emily's boots made no sound. She paused at each corner, listening for footsteps, the shuffle of papers, the faint whisper of breath. Nothing. The office door loomed ahead, solid and imposing. She slid the flash drive into the key slot she had stolen from Rivera weeks earlier. The reader blinked red, then green. The door clicked open. Inside, Harris sat behind his desk, reading a file. He didn't glance up. "Colonel Harris," Emily said evenly. Harris lifted his eyes slowly, narrowing them. "Carter, I was wondering when you'd come around." Emily's voice remained steady. "I'm not here to ask permission. I'm here to show you what your silence has cost." She set the flash drive on his desk. Harris's brow furrowed as he noticed the label, Sable Dawn, Civilian Casualty Records. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Harris asked, his voice low, dangerous. "This could ruin careers. End lives." "I know," she said. "And it's about time someone remembered Kane didn't deserve to be erased." Harris leaned back, jaw tight. "You don't understand. Kane was reckless. Brave, yes, but reckless. He saw things he shouldn't have. And you think publishing this will help? The machine doesn't care about bravery, Carter. Only obedience." Emily set her hand firmly on the desk. Obedience shouldn't justify erasure. Innocent lives were lost, and Kane tried to hold someone accountable. He was silenced for doing the right thing. That's not justice, that's cowardice. Harris's eyes glinted with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. He stood and circled the desk. "And now you've stepped into his shadow. Do you think you can survive where he didn't? Do you think the machine will let you walk away?" Emily met him squarely. "I don't care about the machine anymore. I care about truth. Kane's ledger, those marks on the rifle, they weren't pride. They were conscience. And if I have to risk my career or my life to reveal that, then so be it." Harris stopped, breathing heavily. For the first time, Emily saw a crack in his armor, a glimmer of understanding, maybe regret. "You remind me of him," he said quietly. "Same fire, same defiance. And I can't protect you from what comes next." Emily's heart raced. "Then I'll protect the truth myself." The next morning, the flash drive disappeared from the desk. In its place, a printed copy of Kane's declassified mission notes, partially restored, sat beneath a note in Harris's hand. "Some truths must see the light. The ledger is yours. Protect it." Emily stared in disbelief. Harris had made a choice, a gamble, perhaps to finally honor Kane while shielding Emily from the worst consequences. She read through the notes carefully, each redacted line restored, every civilian casualty documented, every operation traced. Kane's meticulous handwriting lingered like a voice from the past. She traced her fingers over the lines of ink, imagining Kane standing on that rooftop, calculating, observing, carrying the weight of lives both taken and spared. The kill count wasn't a tally of pride, it was a ledger of conscience, etched into steel, remembered through Emily's determination. But victory didn't feel like triumph. Rivera returned cautiously, having watched Emily from afar, and spoke quietly. "You did it, but they'll be looking for you now. That ledger, it's fire," Emily nodded. "I know. But truth has to be fire if lies are consuming everything else." Rivera reached out, hesitation in her eyes. I wanted to help, but I was scared. I'm sorry." Emily placed a hand on Rivera's shoulder. "It's okay. Fear is normal. Courage is rare. You can choose which one you want to be remembered by. Rivera nodded slowly, eyes glistening, and Emily felt the weight of isolation lift slightly. All eyes could be found, even in unexpected places. Emily spent the following weeks preparing the ledger for official submission to the appropriate oversight committee. Every copied document, every witness testimony, every snippet of evidence was catalogued with precision. Harris stayed silent during this period, neither obstructing nor aiding directly except through subtle guidance. It was as if he had passed the torch to her, finally acknowledging Kane's sacrifice and Emily's courage. Emily worked tirelessly. Sleepless nights, endless scrutiny of documents, and constant vigilance against surveillance or sabotage, it all culminated in a single moment. She handed over the ledger to the committee, a bundle of truth strong enough to survive scrutiny, undeniable even to those who had tried to bury it. The impact was immediate. Investigations began into Sable Dawn, civilian casualties, and this systemic erasure of soldiers like Kane. Orders were issued to review restricted missions, and whispers of Harris's complicity slowly surfaced. Emily was interviewed repeatedly, each time presenting facts without embellishment, carrying Kane's story like a torch through the labyrinth of bureaucracy. She found herself transformed. The haunted, cautious soldier who had hidden in shadows had become a force of clarity and conscience. The ghost of Kane had led her here, and now she was ensuring his ledger would not vanish again. One quiet evening, Emily returned to the armory. She picked up Kane's rifle restored, cleaned, polished, and traced her fingers along the etched kill marks. Each one told a story, now illuminated by truth rather than legend. She whispered softly, "I won't forget you. I won't let them erase you." For the first time since she had discovered the rifle, Emily felt a sense of closure. Kane's burden had passed to her, but she carried it with honor, not fear. Outside, the desert wind rustled, indifferent, timeless. But inside Emily, a fire burned steady. Conscience, courage, and a commitment that even the shadows of the colonel's office could not extinguish. Months later, as she prepared to rotate out of the base, Emily received a final letter from Harris. "Carter, you've done what I never could. Kane's ledger will survive, and so will your career if you continue with care. Remember, truth is a weapon. Wield it wisely." Harris, Emily folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her uniform. She glanced one last time at the armory, the rifle, and the files. Her journey had begun with whispers and shadows. It had carried her through fear, betrayal, and confrontation. And now it ended with clarity. The soldier who once cleaned a rifle without thought of legend had become the keeper of truth. And somewhere in the echoes of steel and dust, Kane's spirit, the man who had etched his conscience into cold metal, was finally at peace.